begin about that time. Last week we talked a lot, we began to talk about time in particular and how we reckon our time and how we redeem our time. And we're going to continue a little of that because there was a little bit on that I didn't get to finish last week, and then we'll get into some other things. If you look at your handout that I gave you, it's kind of is a just sort of some medieval charts or whatever you might want to call them. The top left is kind of gives their view of the seasons. So if you notice, you have the outer ring includes spring, summer, autumn, and winter. And between those, you have temperature. You have like states. You have after winter, it's moist. Then it's moist leading up to spring, and then after spring, it's hot, and it's hot leading to summer, and then after summer, dry going to autumn, and then after autumn, cold, and cold again going into winter. Notice that this also has directions on it. So you're looking at it with the east toward the north, the south to the right, west to the bottom, and north to the west compared to what we normally look at it. So we're facing east looking at this chart. And so all of this roughly corresponds to the geography of temperature on the earth in a way, because if you turn it in a direction that has the east going east, you can see the colder is at the top, the northern hemisphere, and the warmer is at the bottom, which is more of the southern hemisphere for the ancient world at that time. So does that make sense, everybody? And this shows the seasonal changes throughout the whole year. So that I just thought I'd include that little chart that Isidore had, break down the seasons, kind of neat.
The prophets, when they in the Old Testament, when they talked about the coming judgment from the northern mountains,
Yeah.
so this would have been north of Palestine, coming into like wreak destruction. They talked about it as the left hand of God's judgment.
Yeah.
And then later on in early church tradition, when they talk about the church thriving in Africa very early on, and churches are just springing up all over the place in Africa, they talk about that as the right hand of God's mercy. So you can see if you have this ancient world map, you can see sort of left hand and right hand imagery. Right. Well, this chart shows that because north is to the left and south is to the right. So this is
right. You're probably talking about. If I can find it. You're probably talking about that chart.
There's a lot of them.
Yeah, but it's that T map. Yeah.
So the sun would rise from the top of the world map and work its way down. And the ocean, which is the place of the underworld, would be at the bottom. Yeah.
So they would have seen as, and there's verses in Scripture that actually kind of indicate this. They would have seen the far north. If somebody just got out and just started walking due north, went as far as they could get, they would consider that a realm of chaos, of the ice and snow, and obviously a place that you can't really survive. They would have seen it that way, and so they would have seen that as chaos, and really anywhere off the map is chaos, including if you went all the way too far south, if you got off the map. But the east is the place where God is. Wouldn't you agree? So, that's why Coptic Christians pray facing east. And the Muslims have this tradition too. They pray east because Mecca is to the east.
The Nativity Star came from the east.
That's right. Yeah, the Nativity Star came from the east. So you see this pattern, this idea of the way the areas of the world work, and it's tied to the temperatures and such.
The door of the
Yes, it did. Good example. Yeah.
No, it's facing what?
He says facing east.
The door of the temple
Yeah.
faced east, eastward.
East, yeah, I know, east is so.
I think
East of Eden.
to me, it's helpful to remember that these people had no idea about magnetic north.
That's true.
Compasses
Yeah.
came very late.
Right.
And I believe it was around the time of the age of exploration.
Mhm.
Columbus and Magellan and all those guys.
Yeah.
Made navigation much easier.
Right. Right.
But there was no idea of magnetic north.
Right. Yeah.
So, they chose east to be the top of the world for
Mhm.
a lot of different reasons. Not
Right.
the least of which is that's where the sun appears.
It's hard for us to visualize the world that way
Yeah.
because
it's-
we've
it's
grown up our
really
whole
weird.
lives, north on the top. But
So they use the stars a lot.
Mhm.
Conservatives use the stars.
right.
They do the stars a whole lot better than we do.
Yeah, that's true. And they use what side the sun comes up on and goes down on to determine east and west and so forth. So
You know what they thought about, because you get in season and all of a sudden the sun, instead of coming straight over, it's kind of up north or
Mhm.
it's south.
yeah,
So,
depending on the season, you're right. Yeah.
Walton actually brought a little bit of this out in his Roman study. Whether he intended to or not, I don't know, but he made mention of the fact that Paul really wanted to get to Spain. The reason why that's important and why Paul sort of picked Spain as his goal is that Spain is at the bottom of the map.
Oh yeah.
So if he gets to Spain, that means he's covered everything.
Yeah.
Like,
It's the
maybe not
southernmost.
literally,
Yeah.
but in a figurative sense.
Right.
His mission is complete if he can get all the way down to the bottom
Yeah.
of the known world.
Right. Right.
This is also a reason why the solstices were so important in
Mhm.
the ancient world,
Mhm.
because it was that midway point
Right.
where this is dead winter,
Mhm.
and this is
Some of the
Height of
winter
summer.
solstice.
Yeah.
And one of the theories about Stonehenge
Mhm.
is that it creates a tiny little window
Mhm.
where you can see the sun as it rises, and that's
Right.
the solstice.
Right. Ancient people couldn't have built something like that. Come on.
That's one thing.
Well, I mean, obviously,
It was aliens, come on.
ancient aliens.
Even Shakespeare writes Midsummer Night's Dream, and midsummer is that summer solstice.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
It's considered somewhat of a magical time.
Mm,
almost.
mhm.
That day is, you don't know what might happen.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Right is wrong, and wrong is right. and
Yeah.
Things turn upside down.
Sure. So Ambrose writes, the seasons are an alternating succession of changes, by means of which the sun, by the fixed dimension of its course, adorns the circuit of the year with a variety that is devoid of confusion. For the seasons derive from the motion of the heavenly bodies. Hence God, when he set them in place, said, and let them be for signs, and for seasons, and for days, and for years. He's quoting Genesis there. So basically, in this medieval view, Ambrose feels that seasons are derived from that movement and what the sun's doing in the sky. Well, that is true in a way, but as you know, we now go by the Copernican theory, which is that the Earth rotates. But from their eyes, it looks like everything else is rotating. So you can't really blame them for that. So in a way, it is true because the Earth, as it's going around the sun, tilts a little bit, and that tilt causes the sun, the direct sunshine, to shine on different places on the Earth, different axes than it does, going around. So I don't mean to turn this into some kind of science lesson, but anyway. So that's how that works. That's how we have summers and winters and so forth. It's because of the tilt of the Earth in relation to the sun. And so, at least they understood that there was a relationship with the sun here. They understood that the sun played a role in this. They understood that it had something to do with the movement of the sun or the movement of the Earth. and they knew that it had something to do with the heat from the sun heating up the air and bringing the summer and vice versa. So, obviously, for some of the things in this book that are not scientifically accurate, we're going to have to give them a pass. This was the year 600, so just the way it is.
Give them a pass on, like, material knowledge?
Yeah.
Or-
Yeah. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, I think the Copernican revolution was a kind of fall. Like it was a mirror of the fall of Eden, because it was a gaining of knowledge, but the end result is a fractured relationship with God and with creation. I mean, sure, yeah, we got more knowledge about mechanically how the world works, but at what cost?
You feel like learning that the sun revolves around the earth hurt us?
I think that this model of our relationship with God and with nature is closer to what we read in Scripture.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think we're probably the ones that need to be. I think that the ancients would probably take it easy on us rather than the other way around.
Yeah, that's probably true.
Is one of those things where you gain knowledge but lose meaning.
Yes, that's exactly right.
That's a good way to put it.
That's
Yeah.
exactly right.
Casualism.
Yeah.
So what we've done here, and really this is a large part of why I'm doing this study. In a lot of ways, science has demystified creation, and so it's important for us as believers to get that mystery back when it comes to creation, to get to hear the voice of God in creation again, to see the hand of God in creation again. Because if we lose that, we lose God in the world around us. If we can't view that and have that world view. So that's exactly right. So different people had different views of what a year was, but a season isn't a year. And so let me just read a little bit more of the mystical view of all this. This is Isidore talking. On the other hand, according to the allegory, winter is understood as temporal tribulation, when the tempests and storms of the world are oppressive. Summer is the persecution of the faith, where doctrine is desiccated by the aridity of falsehood. But spring is the peace of the renewal of faith, when after winter's tribulation the tranquility of the church returns, when the month of the new grain, that is the Pasch of the Lamb, is celebrated, and when the earth is adorned with flowers, that is when the church is adorned with the company of the saints. It's a beautiful picture. So Isidore is drawing a picture of the flowers adorning the earth as demonstrating for us the earth being the church being adorned with the company of the saints on earth. I think that's beautiful, a beautiful picture. And so he sees winter as a type of tribulation. He sees summer as a type of sign of persecution. And he sees spring as the renewal, as the becoming safe again and being renewal of our faith. That's the way he sees that.
Because it's the flipping point? Because it's the in-between state?
What, spring?
Yeah. Is that why those two periods are periods of renewal?
I think that, well, it's not that. I think it's not so much the proximity of it. I think it's more of what happens in spring.
Yeah.
It's not
gentlest.
It's gentlest. It's not freezing, but it's not boiling hot, and it's, you have the flowers come out, and new life is everywhere.
It's the inversion point between the two extremes.
Yeah, we could say that. Yeah.
Except for the whole tornado thing.
Well, yeah.
Let us
So their worldview, and this is kind of my whole point of the study, their worldview is to have a spiritual view or mystical view of all these things around us. They would have a mystical view of that tree in your front yard. They would have a mystical view of, the fact that we have a year, 365 days a year and 4 seasons. Now, when I met Karen, I'm going to bring you up, babe, in the Sunday school lesson. When I met Karen, she grew up in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, or that general area. And so that's much more closer down to the equator than we are here. And so Karen's family didn't really experience seasons like we do here. They didn't have snow down as far as where she lived. You could tell that it got a little cooler, but then for about 2 or 3 months, but the rest of the year was pretty much hot year round. So they didn't really have the seasons thing going on like we do here. And they certainly didn't have the leaves falling and changing and all that. The only thing they sometimes had is if it got too cold in the winter there, if it got happened to have a night that it dips down below 50 degrees or something, all these what do you call those little lizards? Iguanas, yeah, would get so cold that they'd start falling out of the trees. And you'd have iguanas dropping all over the place because they're so cold. Yeah, it's like the iguana apocalypse. And then they'd warm up the next day and they'd be fine, if they didn't get run over. So any more thoughts on that before I move on?
I'm guessing it's most of the church fathers we would consider them to be European.
Most, yeah, or Northern African, yeah,
About half of them were African.
yeah,
Oh, certainly in Africa, but it's northern Africa.
yeah.
Not southern Africa.
Well, and like Alexandria was the center of learning, and that
Yeah.
was a Greek colony, so it was highly Greek, even though it was on North Africa.
Mm-hmm.
So I would think that would impact them a lot.
Sure, yeah.
I don't know how Father Paul might have traveled further than almost anyone else.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah, he may have made it to Spain, they say, so.
We tend to experience this even if we don't realize we're experiencing it. It occurred to me recently that more houses are bought and sold in spring than any other time. Well, that's a moment of renewal,
Mm-hmm.
which is exactly what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, naturally people gravitate towards change in their life in the springtime rather than the
Right.
summer or the winter.
Right.
Spring cleaning and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
We experience these cycles and seasons. We're fractured in our understanding of how they work.
Right.
I don't know what language to describe it.
it's all that winter blues.
Yeah, cabin fever.
A lot of people, like my son, he has a special lamp that he burns during the winter. And he can sit in and read the Bible or something. So
Mhm.
it sort of soothes the winter blues.
Right. Yeah, that's good. So, this is interesting. He's got a little, this is something that kind of hit me when I was reading through this. He does have a little section on the solstice and the equinox, but it's very little. He says very little on it, and I thought that was kind of neat because the pagan religions, this was a huge deal, the pagan religions, the solstices and the equinoxes. They really played these up. They put festivals around them. They had all kind of crazy stuff going on during these times of year.
Still do it.
Are they? Yeah. And so, but Christianity has never really elevated the winter or summer solstice that I know of. I've never heard
Christmas
of
is
it.
pretty close.
Well,
Yeah, but they deliberately missed it.
Yeah.
yeah.
It's like just off by a few days.
It's actually based on the Day of Atonement.
Yeah.
They think that Zechariah received the Annunciation of John the Baptist on the Day of Atonement.
Mm-hmm.
So 9 months later is,
Yeah.
they marked it as June 25th,
Sure. Yeah.
and then birth of John, and then we know that Jesus was 6 months later.
Mm-hmm.
Perhaps not exactly, but
Yeah,
definitely it's
yeah.
on December 25th, so it was like
Sure.
a definite not the solstice.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's close enough for, all the deniers to say, oh, well, that was they just usurped it.
I just pulled out of the pagan religion. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I've never seen any church gathering based on the solstice before at all in a Christian church. If I saw one, I would kind of be a little concerned. Since that's
the winter solstice, that meant the earth is going to come back to life again.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
was highly superstitious thing.
Right.
What if the sun does not?
So they ended up
turn
going
the
through
sky?
magic incantations to try to make sure it comes back, the spring and all that. Very, very tied into pagan magic, stuff like that, all that mindset. So, well, the early science, medieval science, as well as Christians, such as Isidore, saw all these, it's going to be kind of hard for me to explain. They saw all these spheres of influence as being microcosms of macrocosms of the same thing. So in other words, the macrocosm of the cycle of the year, or the cycle of seasons, that's a macrocosm of what a person goes through, which is the microcosm of the seasons. And so we do that all the time too, still, when we say things like, oh, he's going through a season of trial in his life. He's going through a season, he's in the wilderness, a season of time in the wilderness. We use that terminology ourselves often. And so that hasn't really completely died out, which is good. I think that we haven't completely lost that allegorical way of looking at things. Sometimes we don't even realize we're doing it, but that's where this comes from, is this type of thing. The fact that you can even apply seasons to your life in a mystical way like that. Seasons and seasons. So, and that kind of brings us to one of the other charts here. Well, before we go down to the lower right, let me show you the one directly to the right of the one we looked at. It looks kind of like a structure or something, building. So, as you know, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because I don't think that it's going to be anything anybody doesn't already know. But there were 4 basic elements: earth, air, water, and fire. And in their mind, everything contained that. Everything had that going on, and that was really that was what ran the engine of the earth and us as well. So they viewed fire as thin, sharp, and mobile, meaning thin, it doesn't have very much substance to it. You can't grab it. But it's sharp, and then it hurts you. But it's also mobile. You can take fire with you and start a fire here and put one out in another place. Air is mobile, sharp, and it's thick. Earth is thick, it's blunt, and it's immobile. Water is thick, blunt, and mobile. So you still see the differences there between these four things. And he's got pictures of different critters and stuff at different times of year there and that. So that's kind of the way they saw things. But they would have said, okay, the earth is composed of earth, wind, fire, and water, which we probably already knew. The medieval science held to that. But what we may not have known, and this is more to the type of study that I'm doing, is that they also would have carried that mystical interpretation to the person. They would have brought it to a microcosm. And they would have done that and would have said, oh, well, there's too much fire in you right now. You're overheated. You need to calm down. The fire that makes you up is getting a little out of control here. So go sit down, calm down, take a breather, come back when things are in better balance. If you had somebody that was sat around all day and wouldn't do anything and just sat and never got up and did some work or anything like that, there might be too much earth in that guy because he's not immobile. He's not. I mean, he's immobile. He's not mobile.
He's stuck in a rut.
Yeah, he's stuck in a rut. That's right. He's not getting anywhere. So obviously, he's too tied to the earth, and therefore we need to find a way to balance that out in him. He's out of balance in that way.
So I've got 2 questions.
Sure.
And the first one is related to that. So are these comparable to the humors?
Mm-hmm. They sure are. Yeah, we're going to get into that too. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but that's
I'll
okay.
let you do that then. And my second question is, are we supposed to look at this drawing as if it's like a 3D?
I'm not sure.
That's what I was wondering.
It's a bizarre drawing. I'm not really sure.
It looks like, how you draw a box in 3D, except for it's got 2 sides missing.
Yeah.
Or maybe just one side missing.
Right.
Because this figure is solid according to geometrical proportion. That doesn't make any sense to me. There doesn't appear to be any geometric proportion to it, unless it's an attempt at a 3D drawing.
Maybe. Yeah, I don't
It's
know.
like Escher's painting. Read us all up.
It is a very bizarre shape. I don't know what's going on there. I suspect it is supposed to be a building. Because that would be in keeping. See, they would have also applied all that to things too.
Well, if you were to look up at a skyscraper under construction and all you saw were girders,
Yeah.
it would look like this.
Yeah, right.
Of course, they didn't have skyscrapers or
Right,
girders
yeah.
there. But I mean, it might have been a simple wood structure.
Right. They would have understood a wood frame, a concept like that. Yeah.
And if that's the case, then fire and air and their position on that panel match the positions of water and earth, in the back panel.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah. Good point.
I could be on board with that.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, it's just.
So not only they would say that if you had an issue that you were, if you had a person who was constantly on the go, and that person just wouldn't slow down long enough to spend time with his family, or he just was constantly traveling and he had wanderlust, what element would have been out of whack in him? Anybody?
Either water or air.
Yeah, I would say air,
Yeah.
because air is mobile, and water's mobile too. You're right. So it'd be one of those two things or both.
Water is more contained than air.
Yeah, that's true.
Could it cause somebody an airhead?
An airhead.
Yeah, that's you call somebody that guy just an airhead.
Yeah, there you go.
Indonesia still has some of this.
Really?
So yeah, in Indonesia, if you get a cold or you get sick, it's because too much air got inside you.
Mm-hmm.
But mobile or immobile, are we talking about the elements being able to move themselves or a person moving the elements? Because
I think it's.
dig up earth and move it,
Yeah, that's true. You can pick up pieces of it. Yeah, but I think they're thinking that the earth in general, the solid ground you stand on, all of that's in their mind doesn't ever really move by itself. I mean, I guess there's earthquakes, but that's rare. That's an exception.
And I guess moving great amounts of earth is more of a modern thing. That could take a long time. Well, if you would build those ramps, it would take over a city or something like that. It would probably take a year.
We're in Hebrews, we haven't gotten there. Well, I don't think we've gotten there yet, but he quotes that song about I have shaken the earth and I will shake the earth and the heaven again. It's probably, there's some reflection in that statement of this mindset.
Right.
That or you consider the earth immobile, but in all only have I shaken it, but I will again.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think, what do you make of the sharp and blunt? So, like, what does that mean?
I think that just means, I mean, in practical terms, one you can touch and one you can't. You know, fire is sharp. You can't where you reach in and grab that without getting cut, so to speak. It means you're getting burned. Air is sharp too. I'm not really sure. I guess because it gets into things, you know, it'll flow between the slats of your windows. Yeah. So that would be my interpretation of that.
It has a physical force against you.
Yeah,
even though
yeah.
It's not real tangible.
Right.
What they didn't know was that fire is air.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
It's just
Right.
air that's so hot it's blowing.
Yeah.
It's like when Jesus even said, the wind, the Spirit's like a wind,
Mm-hmm.
you know, not where it comes from, where it's going.
Right. Right.
And that's kind of a picture of the Holy Spirit, too. The
Mm-hmm.
Holy Spirit penetrates us.
Absolutely. Yeah. So Paul says of the world and the universe, in a mystical sense, the world properly signifies the human being just as the former is compounded out of 4 elements, so also the latter is made up of 4 humors, correct? Mixed together in one temperament. So that gets us to the humors thing. Again, this may be old hat to some of y'all, but up until just very few hundred years ago, people didn't have nearly the medical knowledge we had today. And so they believed that people had 4 elements making them up. They called them humors. And when those things got out of balance, that's when you had problems, the 4 humors. So the ancient believers saw the connection in all this. Oh, there's 4 seasons in the world. Oh, there's 4 elements in nature. Oh, there's 4 humors in me. This is all connected, you see. This is all intertwined together. And so what is one way in heaven is also the same on earth. What is let loose in heaven is let loose also on earth. So the ancients saw all of this, all of us, and all the cosmos as going through the same cycle, basically, and the same thing. And they interpreted the cycles they saw in the heavens by the cycles that they went through themselves and that the world around them went through. And to them, it indicated, you know, that things in the heavenlies and things here on earth are one. They are one and the same. That's kind of the way they viewed it.
Is there it doesn't really show it in this picture, but is there sort of like a ladder to it or a hierarchy to these?
I don't have one, but I think that idea could definitely
Well, that
suffice.
just occurred to me while you're talking, and I apologize if this is crass, but you know, the lower you go down the human body, what comes out of them is water and solid. You
Mhm.
go up, and then what comes out of a person is air.
Yeah,
And then if you're a saint, at the top of you is a tongue of fire.
yeah, that's
So
true.
there, you know, seems to be an ascending or a descending order.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
it's a great chain of being.
Hmm.
So that was stuff.
Right, right.
Plus, around the time of Shakespeare, there was a whole section of plays called the humorous plays.
Mm. Hmm.
And they were dealing with people whose humors were out of balance.
Huh, yeah,
And so it had comedy, it had tragedy, it had all
yeah,
kinds of
yeah.
things. But they didn't use red fire, they called it black and yellow.
Mm.
And the blood was red. And
Uh-huh.
the flame was stopped.
Hmm. Yeah,
Fire
right.
was
So the guy-
himself.
Yeah.
The guy you described as having too much earth would
Mhm.
probably be considered phlegmatic.
Yeah, yeah. Hmm. He sure would.
Another-
Sick.
Yeah, that's right.
Too much red in the body.
That's right. Yeah, yeah.
Another shocking bit of trivia is the germ theory of medicine was never really accepted until about 100 years
Yeah, that is interesting. This stuff isn't as old as we think it is. There's places on Earth that probably still do this, even today, and really, really limited places. But
I started using leeches to suck blood.
mhm.
Well, I imagine animism in Ethiopia
Yeah, yeah,
goes in,
right.
kill a chicken and shake it over a sick person.
Yeah.
You know,
Well, and the
trails and
whole bit of thought and ideas behind Chinese medicine gets into a lot of this too, and that's still very much a thing. Chinese medicine. There's people that seek that out in Western countries. Acupuncture, all that stuff. It's all
It's huge in America.
Yeah,
We
yeah.
have an acupuncture now.
Yeah, yeah. So you still see bits and pieces of this in our world today, even though it's not a scientific consensus anymore. Even though scientifically it's not the way scientists view the world.
Insurance won't pick it up.
Yeah, insurance won't pick it up. That's right. That's right. But it just goes to show how much that thinking was paramount in history, and it was. If you want a picture of the human race and the way they thought, 500,000 years ago, this is it. This is their thought processes right here. And so, but our faith, Christianity is such that it is not limited to only one thought process. Thank God. It's not limited to just this model of the universe or us. We can have Christianity even with the scientific model that we have now. You just have to be willing to use judgment. You have to be willing to use a mind of reason as you do that. The faith, the Christian thought, the Logos, is there and goes back before this, during this, and it carries on now and will forever carry on after us. So this is just the way people thought about themselves in the world. But they also use this as a lens of interpretation as well. That
It just occurred to me while you were talking, but part of the introduction of the seasons in Genesis and the cycles has to do with going further and further out from the center, right? So the center of the world is Eden, right? And they're kicked out of Eden, they go further out.
Right.
They go further out. And then after the flood, they're even further away from the garden.
Yeah.
The garden it's not on the physical earth anymore. So
Right.
they keep getting further out.
Yeah.
And that's when God explains how the seasons are going to work.
Yeah, yeah.
And then in Revelation, it says that day and night stop. Or like they're one and the same. I don't remember exactly how
Yeah,
it says it.
yeah.
But the reason is because you're back in the center again.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
cycles are done.
So Eden is a perfect harmonious state
It's the center.
in all these things. Eden is where all these things operate in perfect clockwork. It's going exactly the way it's supposed to be. And it's not too far north, it's not too far south, not too far east, not too far west, and everything's in balance. Everything is good. So, but then the fall of mankind comes, and all of creation is affected by this. It's
But then the
disrupted.
heavenly Jerusalem
Right, it's
is
back.
that way because it says that the cycles stop.
That's right. Yeah, no longer plays by those rules.
Right. There's
yeah.
no distinction between, or there's little distinction between ocean and dry land.
Right, right,
Day and
right.
night, there's no distinction between them.
Exactly.
You're back in the center.
And I'll show you the that last chart we looked at, the lower right one, or maybe I haven't looked at this yet. I don't know, but you can really see how that shows how it's all a microcosm as well as a macrocosm. So you see there how this applies on an individual human's level. World, year, and human being are the two things, the three things written there in the middle. So you have the whole world. So this applies geographically, the whole world. Then it also applies yearly in terms of time, the whole world, and it also applies in terms of an individual person, in terms of things being out of balance and out of whack, you say.
It's interesting, when things dry out, that's when the fire season
Mm-hmm.
is at its highest.
Right, right.
Because there's no moisture in the trees or whatever.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
burn a lot easier.
Right, right.
That's why you have to be careful when we're in that season, not to start a fire.
Yeah, yeah, right.
Because it's interesting, I just found it interesting to see the dry
Mhm.
season leads to a fire.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, yeah.
Well, on the other end of the circle, the other side of the circle, what happens to water in winter? It undergoes a similar change.
Mm-hmm. Turns to ice, yeah. So that's the way they would have thought of things. And in large part, this would have been even, I always like to kind of explore what culture would have been like during the early church. And in large part, this is the way people thought even at that point. Even it wasn't even medieval times. They were already thinking this way in large part. So, especially in terms of geography and that stuff. They got more advanced into the four humors of the body as time went on, but other aspects of this, like, again, the geography and all that, and the seasons and everything, they were really into this even by the time Jesus came. So this would have been a way of thinking that Jesus would have been very well acquainted with as he was on earth. He would have been very well acquainted with this way of looking at everything. And his disciples and everyone. So the last thing I'll cover real quick is the 5 circles of the world, the lower left diagram. So these are the people considered the world to be divided into 5 circles. And the first circle is in the Arctic. So if you want to turn this thing this way so that you have the Arctic at the top, the Arctic circle, it just helps us to visualize it in our modern understanding of the world. The first is the Arctic circle, uninhabitable because of the cold. Going clockwise, the second is the summer circle, temperance, and habitable. So he's talking about different areas of the world. Under that, the middle is the equatorial circle, or the equatorial plane, torrid and uninhabitable. Now remember, these people are writing from Europe. All right, that's where this stuff's coming from. So they see north from Europe as being uninhabitable and south from Europe being uninhabitable because it's near the equator. Then the fourth is the winter, and the winter circle, that is temperate and habitable. And then the fifth, you have the Antarctic circle, cold and inhabitable.
Are these latitudes?
I don't know. I hadn't thought of it like that.
They're not continents.
Yeah, I think it's just different ways of seeing areas of the planet. You see what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah, but it's not like, they're not geographical regions. I mean, they are, but...
well, they kind of are.
But they're... So which one is the equatorial circle? What continent is that?
That would be,
Right at the equator.
Yeah, for them it would be Africa.
yeah,
Pretty far.
Africa, Sahara Desert.
But I mean, how would they get to the Antarctic circle? That's a
Like, they
long
knew
way
about the
away.
Antarctic.
That's a good question.
That's beyond South Africa.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that. Yeah, I don't know the answer to that. They must have, though, because Isidore, these drawings are, even though they're written in English, the drawings are contemporary with Isidore. Maybe they understood that if you go far enough past the southern end, that it eventually starts getting cold again. That's the only thing I can figure out. So,
Well, I think the equator, isn't Ethiopia on the equator?
yeah,
So
It's not that hot in the city,
Yeah,
yeah.
you're getting into the unworld at
Yeah.
that point.
Yeah,
What's
That's a
the,
pretty long way to go for things.
that's true.
do you know the date of that, this particular?
Isidore lived in the 600s, late 500s, early 600s. So
Son, either at this time.
yeah, yeah.
And Isidore made this drawing?
Either him or one of his scribes.
Well, the more we study the world, though, now we find that people were more mobile than we ever thought.
That's true. Yeah,
They think, okay, Columbus discovered America in 1642. Now they're realizing that then the Vikings came here.
Yeah.
And then they came in the 1200s.
right.
So it's rewriting history.
Sure.
And
Sure.
so our history books are not quite ready to handle it yet.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, there's still a theory that the ancient Egyptians sailed to South America.
Hmm. And that's how they have pyramids in South America. Yeah.
Vikings,
Actually, the guy, or Heyerdahl, actually sailed a Irish ship across the Atlantic.
Because it would just be impossible for two cultures to figure out how to build a pyramid, right? All right. Well, now this didn't. I realized this study didn't get into a lot of the mystical interpretations, and I want to do more of that next week. I wanted to lay some groundwork here and kind of talk about how they thought and the thought process behind a lot of this. But there's a lot we can say mystically about this in terms of how does this apply to my life? How can I glean spiritual truth from this sort of thing? And we'll begin looking at that again next week. I've already done some of that, but that'll be more of the focus next week than this was. So we're just kind of priming the gun, so to speak, before we set it off.
This is still how more or less how the world is viewed by scientists. You know, you've got the Arctic Circle, and then you've got the temperate zone,
Yeah,
and then you've got the tropical zone.
That's true.
And then
Right.
the mirror image of it in the southern hemisphere.
Right.
That's why I asked if this was.
Very similar to this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It sounds like latitude to me.
It's like 4 zones, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. That's all I have, y'all.
Opposite